What if I told you that the most famous blonde in Hollywood is actually a car mechanic? And what if I told you that her billion-dollar career didn't start on a red carpet, but with a PowerPoint presentation made by a 12-year-old girl? Most people see Sydney Sweeney as an overnight success. They see the magazine covers, the blockbuster movies, and the viral moments, but they don't see the bankruptcy, the divorce, and the years of hearing the word no. This isn't just a story about fame. It is a masterclass in persistence, business strategy, and the terrifying cost of chasing a dream. To understand the empire Sydney Sweeney has built, you have to leave Hollywood and go north, way north, to the quiet town of Spokane, Washington. This is where our story begins. In a simple house on the border of Idaho. In 2009, Sydney was just a normal kid. She played sports, she went to school, and she spent her weekends outdoors. But unlike other kids, she had a secret obsession. She watched movies and TV shows, not to be entertained, but to study them. She realized early on that acting wasn't just make-believe. It was a job. When a small independent film came to her town to scout for extras, Sydney saw an opening. But she knew her parents, a lawyer and a hospitality worker, would be skeptical. They were practical people. They didn't care about glitz and glamour. So Sydney didn't throw a tantrum. She didn't beg. Instead, she went to her computer. She spent days researching the film industry. She calculated costs, potential earnings, and timelines. She put it all into a 5-year business plan presented as a PowerPoint slideshow. She sat her parents down and pitched them on her future. The deal was simple. If they let her audition, she would never let her grades drop. Her parents were impressed by the maturity of their 12-year-old daughter. They agreed, but they had no idea that this single yes would eventually cost them almost everything they owned. The media loves to paint a picture of effortless stardom, but the reality of Sydney's teenage years was a grueling nightmare. After that first taste of acting, the family decided to support her dream fully. They left their life in Washington and drove to Los Angeles. But Hollywood is expensive. Extremely expensive. For years, Sydney's parents drained their savings accounts to pay for rent, gas, and lessons. The stress was suffocating. Eventually, the money ran out. The family went bankrupt. They lost their house. At one point, they were living in a motel, all 4 of them. Sydney, her brother, and her parents crammed into a single room. The financial pressure was too much for her parents' marriage to handle. They eventually divorced. Sydney was just a teenager, watching her family crumble around her. She felt an immense, crushing guilt. In her mind, this was her fault. She was the reason they moved. She was the reason they were broke. In later interviews, she revealed the thought that kept her going during those dark nights in the motel. She said, "I knew I had to succeed in some capacity, so that it wasn't for nothing." She wasn't just fighting for a role anymore. She was fighting to justify her parents' sacrifice. She couldn't just be an actress. She had to be a star. To survive the crushing pressure of Hollywood, Sydney didn't just act. She engineered a system. She treated every role like a university thesis project. For every single character she plays, she builds a unique character Bible. These aren't just notes. They are 100-page books of history, memories, and secrets. She writes their entire life story from the day they were born until the first page of the script. It is how she dissociates. When the director says cut, she simply closes the book. This system was pushed to the limit in 2018. She booked 2 shows at the exact same time. Everything Sucks was a nostalgic 90s high school drama, and Sharp Objects was a dark psychological thriller with Amy Adams. She was flying between sets, switching instantly from a love-struck teenager to a disturbed patient in a psychiatric ward. The mental whiplash would have broken most actors. But Sydney thrived on the chaos. She proved she wasn't just a pretty face. She was a technical chameleon. But the role that would define her career almost didn't happen. When the casting call for Euphoria went out, the casting director didn't want her. They said she wasn't right for Cassie. They didn't even want to let her audition. Most people would have accepted the no. Sydney did not. She went to her mom and said, "Read the lines with me." She recorded her own audition tape in her living room and sent it in directly, bypassing the casting director. The tape was undeniable. She didn't just play Cassie, she inhabited her. The vulnerability, the desperation. She forced them to hire her. Then came The White Lotus. Everyone expected another Cassie. Instead, she gave us Olivia. A character so different you barely recognize the actress. Terrifying, judgmental, cruel. It was the complete opposite of the sweet, broken Cassie Howard. Critics were absolutely stunned by the range. This range wasn't accidental. It was the result of those books. She builds entirely different people, steps fully into their skin for action, and then steps right back out. But while the world was obsessed with her acting method, Sydney was quietly building something else entirely. She wasn't just creating characters, she was building an empire. And she was about to show the world that she could fix a vintage Ford Bronco just as easily as she could fix a scene. But while Hollywood was busy trying to put her in a box, Sydney was busy building an engine. Literally. During the pandemic, she didn't just post selfies. She launched a TikTok channel dedicated to restoring a vintage 1969 Ford Bronco. Here was the glamour girl, the blonde bombshell, covered in oil, changing the transmission herself. It wasn't just a hobby, it was a statement. She completely shattered the dumb blonde stereotype with a wrench in her hand. But she realized that waiting for directors to call was a fool's game. So, in 2020, she decided to create her own calls. She founded 50/50 Films to take control of the product. She wasn't just the talent anymore, she was the boss. Her first major test? A romantic comedy called Anyone But You. But she knew a movie needed more than just a script to succeed. The tabloids went absolutely crazy. Rumors of a real-life affair with co-star Glenn Powell dominated the news cycle for months. The world thought it was a messy scandal. Sydney knew it was marketing. She leaned into every rumor. She orchestrated the chemistry perfectly, turning a simple rom-com into a global blockbuster that made over $200 million. But she didn't stop there. She pivoted immediately to horror with Immaculate, a role she had auditioned for 10 years ago and lost. So this time, she didn't ask for the part. She bought the rights to the script, hired the director, and cast herself. Sydney Sweeney has learned the most valuable lesson in Hollywood. Don't just wait for the phone to ring. Own the phone company. She isn't just lucky, she is an architect of her own luck. And looking back at that 12-year-old girl with the PowerPoint, looking at the global empire she commands today, it is easy to forget the hunger that built it. Critics often ask why she takes so many roles, why she never seems to sleep, and why she films back-to-back movies. The answer isn't greed, it is fear. She works like she is still that broke teenager. She admitted in interviews that she is terrified. If she stops running for even 1 second, the ground will fall out from under her. That is why she is everywhere. Marvel superheroes, horror scream queens, comedy hosts. She refuses to say no.
Well,
She isn't just waiting for permission to be a legend. She is seizing it. She is now producing films for others, using her power to open doors that were once locked to her. To Sydney, Hollywood is not a magical lottery ticket. It is a construction site. You do not wait for a castle to appear. You put on your boots and you build it yourself. Sydney Sweeney proves that a dream without a plan is just a wish, but a dream with a plan is unstoppable. And looking at what she has already built, she is just getting started.